Welcome to another vintage fishing reel service and repair video. In this episode we have a Shakespeare 7500 or Shakespeare Wondereel 7500 model DJ. And if you look up the date codes for reels for Shakespeare's, that indicates it's made, well, this model was first released in 1972. So this is a spincast reel. It's farm fresh, like all the reels I get. And of course, if you've been following along with the channel, I buy reels for myself to collect and to use. They don't just sit on shelves. And as I go through them and service them and repair them, I share a video of it. And so in case you find one and you kind of want to know what's inside, why, you can look at the video and see before you get in there and maybe learn from my mistakes, etc., etc. In many cases, you know, I'm going into these for the first time right on video. So at any rate, we're going to go ahead and get started on this one. And we'll begin by taking the cover off, which is just a slight counterclockwise twist. Pulls off. Looks like the it looks like the spinner head comes off with a nut. And we'll put this in the parts tray. It looks pretty clean in there. Looks like there's a little washer on there. Nut in the washer. Spinner head. Got a little clip here, a little brass clip to keep the spool in place. And then off comes the spool. And we've got a bunch of old crusty line on there that we have to get rid of. There, just like that. So we can put those things in the parts tray and now start working on, I guess we can go ahead and take off the side plate. Okay, and the thumb button goes on the side plate like that, so that's easy enough. Put those in the parts tray. And you've got a lot of peanut buttery grease in here that needs to be cleaned out of there once we get it all disassembled. But a lot of nasty grease in there. So the next step, let's see here. We're gonna have to, I believe, take off this spring here. Yeah, so there's a little clip. It's not a regular E-clip, but there's a little clip on that holds that spring in. So I'm gonna hold the spring down and pull that clip off, and that way the spring won't go flying. And then I can take that nasty greasy spring off, put that in the parts tray, and then I'm thinking that at some point then the this pinion gear and shaft should come out. Okay, the pinion gear comes off. Man, that is some nasty grease on there. I mean, it's like peanut, like really hard peanut butter. And then then that shaft will come out of there. So we'll put that in the parts tray. Now it's just a matter keep an eye on the anti-reverse mechanism when we pull out when we take off the handle and remove the main gear. Take off the star drag adjuster, and noticing that the tension washer here, the concave side faces out, which is typical for these. And then we've got another washer, and then this should now pop out of there. And here's where we want to kind of be careful till we figure out what's going on with our anti-reverse. Okay, so there's our anti-reverse pawl right there, and in this case the claw of the thing is facing downward. So now that we know that, not that it would be that big of a deal through trial and error to get it back the way it was, but it's a little easier just to make note of that. And so now the body is completely free of all loose parts, and that's ready for the parts tray. The main gear, I think this is going to come apart in multiple pieces. So there's going to be a bushing here. Okay, so that bushing slides into the hole of the body there, and then there's going to be a anti-reverse gear that is keyed, so it only, it can't spin on the shaft, and those teeth sort of face to the rear. So if you put it on like that, they'd be facing forward. That would be wrong. Those teeth face towards the rear of the reel. And then you've got a metal drag washer, and then you have a let me get my knife here. You've got a fiber or some kind of a fiber type washer or something. It almost seems, I don't know what it's made out of. It isn't very fibrous, so it could be fiber, it could be, I don't know. And then you got your main gear, and then you've got the main shaft with another, this one's a little bit rusty, but there's another fiber washer that we got to get loosened off of there. Jeez. Yeah, it is fibrous. You can see where some of the fibers have been exposed because it got stuck on there, and some of them stuck to the shaft. So that we'll have to clean off really good. It's not supposed to stick on there like that, so it's definitely in need of service. So the order is main shaft, then fiber washer, main gear, fiber washer, metal washer, bushing. I'm sorry, before the bushing you have your anti-reverse gear, and then bushing. That's the whole shebang here. So we get those in the parts tray. And now, let me get this bushing this anti-reverse in there too. Now we're ready to take all of this to the sink and scrub it with Dawn dish soap and a toothbrush, and in some cases WD-40, especially where the grease and oil is really bad, and getting a Q-tip down in all the holes and that kind of thing, making sure all the old grease is out. And once that's done, I'll be back just like that. Alright, pull out all these parts. I did have to take the main gear shaft out to the wire wheel because it was pretty corroded, and get all of that drag washer fiber off of it and all that rust. I also noticed that there is a spacer washer, shim washer, that goes between the anti-reverse gear and the bushing. That was greased on there. I didn't notice it at first, but there's pretty much all the parts. So now I think I'm going to start with reassembling the main gear assembly, and so that means I'm going to need this. I'm going to take a little bit of grease, not much, on my fingers, and just get a little bit of grease and wipe off the excess on this fiber washer. And then the next thing to go on was the main gear itself. Then we have another fiber washer, which again I'm going to get just a little bit of finger grease on there, and that's it. Wiping off any excess and put that in place. The next thing was our metal drag washer, and this one could use just a little bit more scrubbing with some steel wool to get that excess residue off. And then that's keyed on there, so that kind of keys in on that shaft there. Then you have the anti-reverse, which goes on, it's also keyed and goes on with the teeth facing backwards, so the teeth facing towards the rear of the wheel. You've got that little shim washer, and then you have your bushing. And so so that's ready to, now we should really put a little bit of oil on this here shaft where that bushing goes, and of course some oil on the outside of the bushing, and we can add a little bit of grease to the anti-reverse gear. And before we put that back in, we've got to put our anti-reverse pawl back in, and I'm just going to grease that post, or I'm sorry, oil that post, put that back in again with the claw on the facing down. The claw here is down towards the base of the reel. And then I'm going to actually probably put a little bit more lubricant where that slides against the housing, and then we can put our main gear assembly into place and check to make sure the anti-reverse is working, and it is. We can now grease the teeth on the main gear. And now we're ready to install the pinion gear shaft and pinion gear. So we should oil that first and slink that in there and get our pinion gear in there as well and get that meshed up with the main gear like that. And then we have to get our well, we can oil that, I suppose, or grease the pinion gear, and then we can slide our spring back on. And then we've got this little clip right there, and I'm going to pull down on the spring till we get past to where that groove is that this clip fits into, and then slide that clip into place, and that's putting tension on the spring. We can now put our handle assembly back together, which involves first a metal washer and then this tension washer, which looks like it's lost a lot of its tension. So I'm going to just bend that out a little bit. The convex or the concave side faces out and it keys onto there, and then we can add our star drag adjuster. A little bit of extra cleaning on this corrosion on the handle with some steel wool, and we've got that handle and then our nut. Okay, now I think we're ready to go ahead and button up this assembly here, or the body of the thing. We're going to put a little bit of grease where the button contacts the pinion gear shaft, and actually I think I'm going to oil the post that the button hinges to, like that, and then reinstall our side plate and screws. Okay, now you don't probably really need to do much lubrication of this spool because it doesn't spin. The drag is basically associated with the handle, and this spool has a post here that you need to get in one of these post holes, so that when that goes in, it's not going to spin. And quite frankly, the spindle on this thing is much narrower than the hole in the spool, so it's not even going to be a matter of wanting to come off difficult. It's not going to get corroded on there or whatever. So I don't know that you really need to do much lubrication on this spool. Maybe a little lubrication up and around here, and And then we can add our spinner head, and remembering that that had this toothed washer. And oops, what did we forget? We forgot to secure the spool into place. Now something's kind of goofy here because this thing just doesn't want to fit in there very tightly. Probably a little bit sprung. I could probably end up taking and springing that out a little bit, but it seems to be doing the trick, so I'm going to leave it. So now we can get the spinner head on, the little washer, and then finally the nut. And take and tighten that up on there. And of course, if you hold that spinner head, then you can see if your drag's working. So I'm keeping that from moving with my hand. It's not allowing me to wind in. If I tighten that up, it should continue to get tighter and tighter, harder and harder to turn. So now it's much harder to turn. Okay, so now all we have to do, there's multiple drain holes on here, so it doesn't really matter which side goes down. There's a big scratch there. Maybe I'll put that down, put the pretty side up, make a clockwise twist, maybe wipe it off a little bit. And there you have a 1972 Shakespeare Wondereel Model 7500 spincast reel. Oh, what did we forget? We forgot to do a little lubrication here in the high handle knob. I did hit it with WD-40 in the sink, but we'll lubricate a little bit. And so now that thing's working like new again, ready to go fishing and provide somebody with lots of enjoyment. Hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching.